Welcome to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. On this podcast, we talk about speech, language, and all things happening with your child, giving you specific tactical information you can use to help your kids talk, listen, and thrive in their academic journey.
Well, hello and Happy New Year, everybody. I am so glad that you've joined me today on this podcast, the Let's Talk About Talking podcast. My name is Adrienne Fuller. I'm a speech language pathologist, also known as Miss A, the SLP. I only say it that way because that's what all the kids in the clinic call me, because Adrienne was always too much for their little mouths. And so quickly I became Miss A. And the whole purpose of this podcast, everybody, is to help parents walk their journey with their children, all things speech, language, academics, because I was a former teacher. So I always love to start off the year with, a look back and then a look forward. And today I'm going to tell you my take on moving the needle forward when it comes to your kids and things of that nature. So the new year to me is an interesting time of year because, because I was a teacher for so long, I always have kind of measured my years in the school year. So actually the new year, January, always seems like the middle point to me. So maybe it's that way to you, but traditionally, we always look at January as like the time that we want to get things done and get things accomplished. You look on social media and everyone's posting up a storm because everyone's going to be an influencer this year. So you see everyone just super posting for the first 3 weeks or a month. Same with the gym. Everyone wants to get in shape. And so we put down all the crappy food we ate in the holiday and we hit the gym super hard for the first month. So, but many of us, I know I've done on both counts, have started something and then kind of let it fizzle away for whatever reason. And so let's talk about when it comes to your kids though, what the new year could look like for them. So anytime the school year starts, we start fresh. We start with everyone has the highest of hopes and the best intentions. But about now, we're kind of settling into, okay, this is how my kid is doing in school. This is how my child is doing at daycare. This is how my child's doing in speech. All those things. And so no longer can we still say, we're going to give it a little time, or, maybe next quarter. 2 quarters are down. We've got 2 to go. And so let's talk about what you can do to move the needle forward for these last 2 quarters of the school year. And so first, I highly recommend is that you take an honest assessment of where your child is now. So like I said, if like they're in VPK, there's been they've already had that one assessment, I believe, and VPK assesses or tests the kids to see where they are in their journey. And so maybe they've had an assessment. If they're in school of any kind, you've probably had a meet the teacher night, you've had an opportunity for report cards or parent-teacher conferences. And so this is a time, in my opinion, to be super honest. And I almost hate to tell parents that because I feel like you guys always beat yourself up as parents. And so first, acknowledge that there's a ton going on. We're in the middle of a recession. Things are higher price-wise. And it just feels like we have to do more to do the same things we've done, right? Like in order to keep living in the same place, apartment or house, or even feed your kids, it costs way more money to do that, which results oftentimes in you have to work more. And so you can start out the school year saying, we're going to read every night. We're going to practice our speech sounds every night. We're going to work on transitions every night. But the truth is, you're probably exhausted and just want to eat and go to bed anyway. And that is the reality of it. But it's time for us to look at where your child is. Give yourself some grace, but let's talk about what we're going to do now, because I'm a huge proponent of let's not wait and see. Let's just go ahead and see. So if you feel like there's an assessment or an appointment you need to make, go ahead and make that appointment. If you feel like it's time to find a tutor for your child, or find a speech therapist or an occupational therapist or an ABA therapist, I think that that's what needs to happen. And that's okay. But those first 3 years, if your child is a young one, those first 3 years are so critical. And so I highly encourage you to go ahead and see. You don't have to do anything with the information. Remember, you don't have to do anything with the information. You just, if you know it, then you can digest it and make a move. But it's really hard when the situation becomes a little so far gone that then you're scrambling. So I've actually heard doctors say that same thing, like don't wait until you have a health scare to get your team in place. Go ahead and take care of those appointments sooner than later. All right, so after you take an honest assessment, then I want you to start with the end in mind. So by the end of the school year, because I like to go for short spurts. I feel like our attention spans are much shorter these days. And so I feel like something that's shorter is also, we're able to kind of reach it or make adjustments. So I just like shorter time frames. And so start with the end in mind. By the end of the school year, I want my child to, what is it? I want my child to read on a 3rd grade level. Or by the end of the school year, I want my child to read better than they read today, which is probably even a little better. Or by the end of the school year, I want to understand more of what my child says. Because right now when they talk, I can't understand anything they're saying. Or by the end of the school year, I want my child not to hit people. And that is a real thing. And that is a fair goal. And I always say sometimes our kids are aggressive. I hate that word for a lot of reasons, but sometimes they're just frustrated, guys. And we need to talk about why the hitting is going on. But maybe we'll do another podcast on something different. But so maybe you need to look into, is it a different school that they need to go to? Do they need more support when they're in school? Do they need to have someone, when I say more support, do they need to have a behavior therapist come in? Do they need a speech therapist because they're not talking, so maybe they're hitting? Do they need a teacher switch? And so those are all goals, but start with the end in mind. Like, where do you want to be with your child? Where do you want your child to be? And let's back it up and kind of break it down into digestible steps. Goal setting, this is nothing new. I'm just a friendly voice over the airwaves saying, hey, break it down a little bit, because before you know it, it'll be spring break and then it'll be summer. And if we don't take a look at it now, because life is happening, or it feels like it's happening so fast, you're going to look up and it's summer and you're making summer plans. So take a few seconds in your super busy day. I acknowledge that, to think about, just consider it. All right. So once you kind of figure out, okay, this is what we're working toward, I highly recommend you don't do too many things at once, because man, it can be overwhelming for your child and also for you. And so, hey, man, we haven't made the honor roll at all this year, or man, we are still failing chemistry. Okay, let's move up for a C in chem, and that's for, and I will accept that. And so, start with that. But then once you start making your plans and your goals, I'm gonna give you a warning. And not a lot of people say this, but I say, expect for it not to go your way at first. And I'm not saying think it's never going to go your way, but have you ever noticed, like, when you make a decision to do something, sometimes, many times, something happens to kind of rock it a little bit? So, like, if you're, okay, I'm going to train for this marathon, you sprain your ankle, or then all of a sudden your child gets sick and you can't train like you used to. So I'm saying, expect that you might have some bumps and determine that that's still not going to stop you. So if you feel like, okay, my child needs speech therapy, I need to find a speech therapist. It may happen when you call the one that you are finally comfortable with, seeing your child or communicating with, that person is full, or they're not taking new patients, or they don't accept your insurance. So I'm saying that not to be negative, but to say, hey, it could happen that there could be road bumps that might discourage me. And so I need to remember, hey, okay, there's another way. Or even have you ever set yourself up and you go to this appointment and then you go to the appointment and it's really not what you thought it was going to be? So I'm saying, don't be discouraged. At this point of the year, a lot of parents are making plans for tutoring, ACT prep. Well, that was probably last fall, but ACT prep, or even driver's ed. If your child is younger, they're making plans for all the therapy, speech, occupational, behavior, or ABA. And so you might find there's a waiting list, or, oh man, I'm ready to get my child tested for autism. I'm going to call the developmental pediatrician, or I'm going to call the neurologist, and you can't find anyone that takes your insurance. You get what I'm saying. If at first you don't succeed, dust yourself off and try again, in the words of Aaliyah. So expect it not to go your way, but determine that you're going to keep trying. All right. The next thing I highly recommend is that you plan for interruptions. Just like before, I said, once you make your mind up to make a change in whatever area for your child's development, plan on what's going to happen if your child doesn't love. What if the child doesn't love the provider, or has a full-on meltdown every time they go into speech, which happens to us all the time? And let me just tell any parents, they seem so embarrassed, but it kind of comes with the territory. For me, I'm like, I don't mind screaming as long as they're coming. Most of us think that. So don't stop bringing your child because they do what kids do, you know? And plus, sometimes in these therapies or tutoring, it's like they're super uncomfortable and they're acting out in that way. So just remember that and keep that in mind. Like, have you ever learned something new? Like when I was learning salsa dancing, it was so embarrassing. I'm like, it's like I have two left feet. I can't get the steps, especially once we got, higher levels. So keep that in mind. They're learning something new and they're being forced to break habits that they've had for 1, 2, 3, 7, 16 years. Okay. And so when you plan for those interruptions, also try to make an alternate plan. So, hey, if he doesn't love the provider, hey, we'll stick it out until we can find a new person. Or if I can't get to therapy on time, I'll see if they can do a virtual session. But consistency is important to me. Okay. All right. So the last thing I want you to do is give yourself grace. Man, you are doing the best you can. I just want that to, I just love that to sink in, because I feel like parents always, and I know there's just so much worry that comes with being a parent. You just want to do right by your kid. You want them to be thriving, great, well-adjusted, healthy kids in this sometimes difficult world. And so give yourself grace, give your kids grace. Because sometimes I see that too, like we're riding our kids so hard and, well, you have to do it like this and you should do it like this. And we ride them so hard, we don't always see that they have so many really good traits already. So give yourself grace. And hey, what you did or didn't do in the past, it's in the past. But all you can do is from today on, do something. If you need to do something different, because maybe somebody's listening and they're saying, you know what, I wasn't doing my best. You know, for some reason I couldn't be there for my child like I wanted to. Like I had my own thing, or I'm fighting with my spouse, or it looks like we're going to get divorced, or I lost my job and I'm trying to just numb myself. Whatever it is, that's in the past. And do what you got to do to get back on track. And because you love your child. That's undeniable. We see kids and parents all the time, and sometimes it's like, ooh, like you look sad, like, oh, we're not, you know, like, or sometimes it can appear like, oh, this parent's not consistent, or they're not whatever. But I've never said this mom doesn't love her child, or this dad, because we get a lot of dads that bring their kids into the clinic. This dad doesn't love his child. So I know you love your child. And so, but part of that is, hey, let's get what we've got to get done for this child, and let's get the information. And I always say, and we had a previous episode, and Alicia Bracchia was a guest, and she was a psychologist. And she said, you know, don't not get the information because you don't want to know. Get the information and hold on to it. Like, you can get a diagnosis or your child, or get your child tested or whatever. And then if you don't want to do anything with that information, or you can get your child evaluated by a speech therapist or an occupational therapist. You don't have to do anything with the information, but you have it, and then you can start to sit with it and make a plan to what you're going to do. So, but give yourself grace and do what you got to do. Now, I just want to remind you that it's the beginning of the year, so let's go be great. I know that you're great. I know you love your kid. I know you want what's best for them, and as do I. My goal is always to walk with you in this journey and to be your teammate along the way. And so I always encourage that you like and subscribe this podcast. Also, you can share this podcast. So if I've said anything that you think resonates with someone else, send this to them, text it to them, share it. I would super appreciate it. And I just want you to know that making those moments, everyday moments, teachable moments, is what life is all about. Remember, all it takes is 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes to make your plan, 5 minutes to do those practicing speech challenges, 5 minutes to have a genuine conversation with your child. You will be so glad that you did. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Let's Talk About Talking podcast with your host, Adrienne Fuller, language and communications expert for kids of all ages. You can grab Adrienne's book, 30 Days to Get Your Toddler Talking, on Amazon or at speechbuilders.org.